If you want to learn more about bike theft and crime rates in Bellingham, hear our answers to the most common questions we get about bike theft, and learn how you can avoid being a victim of this crime, then this episode is for you. Hi, I'm Officer Knutson, and this is the Perspective Project, where we share information about our department and talk about issues that are impacting our community. When it comes to the topic of bike theft, there are generally two types of people I run into. Those who are completely unaware that it's an issue at all, and those who are very aware that Bellingham, like decent-sized cities with very avid biking communities, has a fairly significant issue with bike theft. Unfortunately, most people only become aware of the bike theft issue after they have a bike stolen. And this is one of those issues that once you become aware of it and you start to see patterns, it's really hard to unsee it. With online communities like the Bellingham Stolen Bike Facebook group, it can leave you pretty overwhelmed seeing picture after picture every day of stolen bikes. And even though there's a tremendous benefit to a group like that, and they've helped us recover numerous bikes over the years, it can really skew your perspective and leave you pretty jaded. It can also make you feel like you're not safe taking your bike out anywhere, and maybe there's nothing you can do to prevent your bike from being stolen. At the end of this video, I'll share data-driven tips on bike prevention and show you a real-world example of a bike recovery that really illustrates the best-case scenario if your bike got stolen. But first, I want to try to paint an accurate picture of how often bike theft happens in Bellingham and how that crime stacks up against other crimes and calls for service that also take up police resources. In the span of 1 year, from October 20th, 2019 to October 19th, 2020, the Bellingham Police got 75,748 calls for service. During that same time frame, there were 407 bikes stolen in the city of Bellingham. But that's just one segment of property crime in general. During that same time period, we also had 471 auto thefts, 733 burglaries, that's people going into buildings or houses, thefts and shoplifts, and vehicle prowls, that's people breaking into vehicles, was 1,271. In addition to property crimes, there are a number of other calls that we respond to. And I won't go into all of it now, but I'll put some of the numbers up on the screen so that you can pause it and look over them if you want to. But some of those categories would include crimes against people, and then we have traffic-related calls, which are not traffic stops, but calls that we get sent to from 911. And then there's the community caretaking type calls that, as you look over the list and see the high numbers, you can see that that takes up a significant amount of resources. But let's get back to the bike thefts in particular. Of the 407 that were stolen last year, here's some information that I think is worth pointing out. Of all the stolen bikes, 56% were stolen and the owner could not provide us with the serial number. We also recovered 25% of the bikes. That's 102 of the stolen bikes were found. And here's possibly the most important statistic. 74% of the recovered bikes all had serial numbers on file when the report was made. We'll mention throughout this video how important the serial number is, but I really want that to sink in. So now that we have a bit of perspective on bike theft in Bellingham, I want to address the top questions that we receive from citizens. There are a number of officers in our department that go above and beyond when it comes to bike theft investigation and enforcement, and I asked 3 of them to help me address these questions. Here's what they had to say.
If you look at the national average, we have a higher rate of property crime than equal-sized agency in other areas, and I think bike theft is specifically an issue here because we have such a bike culture. Most people own multiple bikes, and there are very expensive bikes with the world-class biking that we have with Galbraith, so it's just a target-rich environment, I think. I think bike theft, like most property crime, has an element of being attached to the drug culture. I worked in our narcotics unit for about 4.5 years and definitely recognize that these folks aren't your normal citizenry and that they're not working 9-to-5 jobs. And so they've got to feed their drug habit, which is relatively expensive, through crime. And a large portion of that is property crime, steal stuff to sell it or to trade it for those narcotics. I think addiction is obviously a powerful motivator for folks out there, and consequences for getting arrested for a property crime is probably not going to be the deterrent to get that person clean from that addiction. And so that's a complex issue that requires a complex solution. in my experience, both with working patrol and in our neighborhood anti-crime team, I've certainly arrested the same people over and over again for bike theft. And so it's those specific individuals, the deterrent of going to jail for a bike theft was not greater than the need or desire to commit that crime a second or third or fourth time. And those are the only times that we've caught them, which is probably a smaller percentage of the times that they're actually committing those crimes. I think that most people are unaware of the level of crimes and calls for service that we go to on a yearly basis. I think people want to believe that everyone is inherently good and trusting, and so bike theft particularly is a crime of opportunity, is what we're finding. Unlocked bikes, bikes left in backyards, and that's just people trusting others that they're not going to steal their bike. And I think for us to really make an impact on this, we have to change our mentality as a community and secure our bikes in a better way.
Many people call in and complain because they see these locations around town where there is a large quantity of bike frames, tires, parts, and they are seeing somebody actively what we call Frankensteining, so taking parts from one bike, putting it on another. That creates a lot of problems for us in being able to figure out, one, if there is a crime being committed, and second, how do we approach a situation that like that from a legal perspective? A lot of these parts that you are seeing in these chop shops are just abandoned property. When we clean up camps, when local businesses have these things left over, they all go to one place, they go into garbage cans, and these type of people that know how to work with bikes are just grabbing these out of trash bins and collecting them and then taking the parts that they need to be able to put together a bike, and then they're getting rid of them.
All sorts of people bring me stuff, man. And I give away bikes. I give away a ton of bikes. Whoever comes by, I just disperse it out, whatever people bring me. Bicycles, you name it, man.
When did you come up here from Berkeley?
Like a year and a half ago.
Oh, okay. What do you think of Bellingham?
I like it. It's pretty cool. Bellingham's pretty rad. Yeah, I really like the bike scene.
So the hard part from a law enforcement perspective is being able to articulate that either the frame or the parts are stolen. Generally, the frame is the only thing that has a serial number on it that allows us to be able to track it in a nationwide database or from a local perspective. One of the other problems that we run into is, where are these chop shops located? Let's say that it's on private property. On the private property, we have to have a landowner that is in touch, one, with their piece of property. A lot of times we have people from outside of Bellingham that own the piece of property that have no idea what's going on. The tough part on the other side of that is public property. Unfortunately for us as law enforcement, we are kind of stuck in the middle of this social issue. On one hand, one side of the public wants us to clean these up because they are eyesores. On the other side, we have the people that look at, well, no, these are homeless camp sweeps, and they don't want us to do it. So again, we are in a very difficult situation in how do we handle these on public property when we're getting kind of pulled in two different directions from each side.
One is getting people to report their bikes stolen in the first place. We need to be aware that there are certain bikes that we're looking for, and when we do see those bikes out there, we may not be in a position, it may not be an opportunity to stop. We may be on our way to a call that doesn't allow for us to take that time to stop and chat with that person, look into that bike further. And then there's the times that we do have that opportunity. And then once we do make that contact and we are looking at that bike, a huge challenge is determining that that particular bike is a stolen bike that was reported, and figuring out who it belongs to so that we can further articulate why we may want to take that bike from that person. We often do come across bikes that we can be fairly certain they're stolen, but we do not have the evidence to prove that that bike is stolen. So unfortunately, we have to let that bike go with the person that currently has that in their possession. As a patrol officer, I don't feel like there is a lot of time to go look for stolen bikes. Dispatch is constantly asking us to go handle calls, and we have follow-up to do. We don't have a lot of time these days to do proactive work. In the past, I was able to be part of our proactive unit. It was called the anti-crime team. We didn't have to stay available to be dispatched to calls all day. So we could pick and choose the calls that came up to help out with, and we also had the freedom to go look for things like stolen bikes. We did have an opportunity to respond to a call. Someone had their bike reported stolen, and they had found it for sale on OfferUp, I believe. They contacted the police after seeing that post and wanted to get their bike back. And that was one of the most fun and satisfying things that I remember from doing that, was working through that investigation and getting that person their bike back. Unfortunately, due to some retirements and staff leaving, we had to dissolve that unit. And what we're hoping is in the near future, when our staffing allows, we will have this unit again. It's a lot of fun and really productive. So as busy as our patrol folks are these days, and without having our proactive unit in place, it's imperative that our community is vigilant, that they are aware and looking out for their neighbors and taking steps to protect their property.
As Officer Brewer mentioned, community awareness is a critical piece of bike theft prevention. After I read through a year's worth of bike theft reports, there were 4 things that really jumped out at me. First of all, 36% of all the bikes that were stolen were not locked up at all. They were typically left in yards, in open garages, on porches or balconies, and people generally felt like their property was going to be safe. So if you lock your bike at all, you can help yourself avoid being one of the 36% of the bikes stolen without a lock. The second thing that jumped out to me was that 41% of all the stolen bikes were locked, but in all but 2 cases, they were locked with cable locks. No real bike thief takes a cable lock serious. They only stop an honest person or a thief without the right tool at that time from taking your bike. Avoid cable locks. The third takeaway is don't give thieves time and privacy to figure out a way to steal your bike. 13% of the bikes stolen were taken out of buildings. Typically, this would include detached garages or community storage rooms, but this is even off vehicle racks that have very good, high-quality locks. But if you give a thief time and privacy, they can figure out a way to defeat any lock. So try to take that out of the equation. And the last step, of course, is record your serial number. Don't be one of the 58% of the people that gets their bike stolen and isn't able to provide us with that information. It takes about 30 seconds to snap some photos of your bike, flip it over, and take one more photo of where the serial number is usually located. Archive that away, and hopefully you'll never need it. We often get asked about registering your bike online, and while you don't need to do that, there are some benefits. Websites like 529 Garage and Bike Index allow you to enter your information, and if your bike was stolen, you can update that information on the website. That gives the ability for citizens to be able to run the serial number if they found your bike out in the community and verify that it was stolen. The big thing to remember is not all police officers are checking Bike Index or 529 Garage. We're going to run your serial number through a national database, and that information has to be there, but again, we can only have that information if you provide it to us when you make a police report. And now I want to wrap up this episode showing you an incident that happened just last week, and it really illustrates the best case scenario if your bike does get stolen. Well, talking to my dispatcher, trying to run it. Okay, I'll keep doing a little research, but that serial number came back, so that's good enough to grab it for the time being. Hi, this is Officer Knutson with the Bellingham Police. Is this Francisco? Good, thanks. Hey, a citizen found your bike down on Cornwall, and I'm out with it right now. Are you in a position to come down and grab it? Francisco?
Yes, sir.
How's it going?
Great.
I'm Officer Knutson. This is Galen. You drove by and saw the bike, so.
We're good. I can't believe you guys got it. That's great.
Good. All right. Well, I'm glad to get you back.
Man, no kidding. That's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, we'll be
Right on.
tomorrow. Hey,
Have a good evening.
Absolutely.
So remember, take some photos of your bike, record your serial number, register it online, and if your bike does get stolen, call 911 and speak to an officer to make a report so that we can give you every chance possible of getting your bike back. That's it for this episode. I hope you found this information helpful.